Hello, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Caprin. I'm sorry that I had issues. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm sorry I had issues with my computer, but I'm very glad to be here and share with you the legacy of my mother. Her name was called Rose. Why I want to share with you her legacy is that she was an extraordinary woman. But when I look around or when I see what's going on today, she represents many mothers because she was married when she was very young. She was married when she was barely 14. And when she got married, it took her 5 years to have a child. And she was almost sent back to her parents because in my culture, a barren woman is like an outcast. So while she was with my dad said, let's try the doctors, the missionary doctors where they were working. And the doctor told my father that bear with her, she's okay, she's going to have a child. So I was born 5 years later. And she was very patient, very beautiful. She was beautiful inside and outside as her name. She was very extraordinary because in her time, she was not allowed to go to school. But she was very brave because my father was a teacher and she asked my father to homeschool her. I think she was one of the first few women who were homeschooled. She studied grade 1 at home up to grade 6. And she was able to read and write. And she was very grateful that my father or her husband was able to help her. Then a few years after when I was born, the Rwandan war broke out and they went into exile. My father was educated and went to they went to Zimbabwe where he got a scholarship. But unfortunately, just 1 year later, my father had heart attack and he was rushed to South Africa. And it was during the fights in South Africa. It was Mandela's time where there were riots and conflicts. So my father had surgery. He had open heart surgery, but he was left there by himself. The doctors left the hospital, so he died alone. And my mom was not able to go to bury him. So she was in Zimbabwe. My father was buried by other people, by foreigners. And that gave her too much trauma that she could not bear it. So she asked the missionaries that they could return her home, which was Rwanda. And they told her, your country is in war. You can't go back. But she pushed hard and she went back to Rwanda. And when she went in the country, she found most of her relatives had gone in exile in Uganda, Congo, and surrounding areas. She decided to stay, but in order to overcome her pain, she started drinking. She was too traumatized because she didn't have any life again in the country. She lost her husband and she lost most of her people and she found herself alone. So a few years later on, my relatives were in Uganda. They decided to take me away from her because in my culture, women did not have rights even to own their own children. So she remained by herself. She became a homeless woman. She became everything I could name, very painful. I was growing up in Uganda. It took me 20 years to find her again. I decided to sneak back in the country. I didn't have any passport, but I sneaked in and I went to see her. And my aim was to save her because I thought that maybe I was blaming myself that maybe she missed me and that's why she was on the street. But when I reached there, she had suffered so many years. I tried my level best. I worked and bought her a house. I decided to get married so that I can bring closer to me. And she became a little bit okay. But again, the genocide came on and added on other wounds to her. So she died later, a few years after the genocide, because of the trauma and the war, the consequences of the war. She died while I was here in America. I never had a chance to bury her. But I'm sharing the story because she was very strong, very brave, but she never got help. So when I look back, I found that this situation, most of the women in third world countries suffer the same. Even the women here, when they come as refugees, they suffer in silence. They suffer trauma, they suffer mental breakdown, and no one is there to hear them. Because sometimes it's a shame to speak out about your trauma or to speak about your mental breakdown. So she died in silence. She died because of that. But when I look back, I think that if she was in a country like this, she would have had help, she would have been helped. So my colleagues, students, and fellow teachers, and everyone who is on this call, please reach out and help anyone whom you see. We have a lot of refugees. They are suffering. They're just in silence because they fear. They fear of the stigma. They fear. They don't know how to handle it. Especially young women, boys. I've seen a lot of trauma in refugee communities, and they keep quiet. So thank you, everyone, and thank you for understanding and sharing my story. Thanks a lot. Bye.